I once believed the man I married was my safe harbor until the night I saw a red lipstick stain on his shirt and my world collapsed. My name is Isabella, 35 years old, living in Seattle, Washington. I work as an HR manager at a software company. My life used to be peaceful, boring, perhaps, but at least stable. I married Thomas when I was 28. He's an IT engineer, quiet, punctual, and calm. Or at least he was, in the beginning. But for the past 6 months, Thomas had been coming home late. His excuses? Overtime, team meetings, urgent server issues. I believed him. I had no reason not to until one night. It was a cold Friday evening. I had dinner ready and waited. The wall clock crept past 7 p.m., then 8. Around 9, Thomas walked in, his coat damp from fog, laptop in hand like always. But what froze me was the faint red stain on the collar of his white shirt. Lipstick. Not bold, but enough to make my stomach twist into a knot. I said nothing. I quietly washed the dishes, trying to hide the pounding in my chest and the storm brewing in my mind. Could it be from someone else? A hug from a female colleague? An accident? Or I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I replayed every little thing I had ignored. The strange perfume scent on his clothes, how he kept his phone closer than ever, the lack of intimacy lately. I decided not to confront him directly. I needed clarity. So, I installed a GPS tracking app on his car, a move I never imagined making against my husband. And then, on Tuesday night, the app showed a location that nearly stopped my breath. Sunset Apartments, Block D. That wasn't his office. There was no company building there. I looked it up on Google Maps, and my heart clenched again. It was a luxury apartment complex, 15 minutes from his workplace. I sat in my own car, eyes glued to the screen. At exactly 8:15 p.m., Thomas's car stopped there. 30 minutes later, he emerged with a blonde woman in a tight dress, and they both got into his car. And they drove toward our home. I was shaking. I didn't cry. I was just silent. Because tears couldn't describe what it feels like to be betrayed so blatantly in the middle of a snowy night. She sat in his back seat without hesitation, as if she'd done it 100 times, right under my nose. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen. I knew my actions were irrational, but I couldn't stop. Thomas opened the car door for her, a gesture he hadn't shown me in years. She smiled, a smile that stabbed my heart. Not because it was beautiful, but because it was familiar. I used to be the one who received that smile when Thomas still loved me. They didn't drive straight home. Instead, they took a detour through a side street, one with no public cameras. I watched the GPS move, my heart pounding like war drums. And then, they stopped, lingering in the dark, just a few blocks from our house. I didn't want to imagine what happened inside that car, but of course I did. That entire night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling next to a man who had betrayed me, and he slept like nothing had happened. The next morning, I made coffee like I always did. Thomas came down, looking tired, rubbing his head, and said, "Had some server issues last night. I'm guessing you went to bed early." I just smiled. Yeah, everything's fine. I had become a skilled actress overnight. But instead of collapsing into tears, I began to plan. I didn't want to be the kind of woman who finds out her husband is cheating and does nothing but cry, scream, or beg for the past. I wanted the truth, all of it. Who was she? When did it begin? What else had he lied about? I hired a private investigator. His name was Martin. Older guy, seasoned, and best of all, didn't ask too many questions. Within 3 days, Martin returned with a thick folder of photos. In them, Thomas and the woman were having dinner at a French restaurant. He was feeding her, dabbing her mouth with a napkin. I had to look away when Martin showed me that one. Another photo showed them walking hand in hand in the rain, no umbrella, like they were living in some romantic film I was never cast in. Martin told me her name was Samantha Green, 29 years old, marketing assistant, recently transferred from the main office in California. Single, lives alone. and according to office gossip, close to a certain manager. That manager was my husband. I stood face to face with the woman sleeping with my husband. She didn't flinch. She smiled, like I was the one intruding on her world. I wasn't going to sit and wait anymore. I needed to see it, hear it, feel the truth with my own heart, not through anyone else's lens. I put on light makeup, a crisp white blouse, and black trousers, the kind of outfit that made me look like a business partner, not a betrayed wife. I walked into Thomas's company building at exactly 9 a.m. Monday, under the pretense of meeting HR to discuss training collaboration. The receptionist asked for my name. I said, Isabella Wright. She paused. Oh, you're Thomas's wife? I smiled. Depends on what he's calling me these days. I was offered a seat in the waiting room, but I didn't wait. I walked straight to the 4th floor, where Martin said Samantha worked. Her office was at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar. I stepped in. She was typing, her back to me. Long blonde hair, sweet raspberry-scented perfume. When she turned around, her blue eyes locked onto mine for a few seconds before realization dawned. Oh, I'm Isabella, Thomas Wright's legal wife. She didn't panic. She didn't look away. She simply smiled. I figured you'd show up eventually. I was speechless. Her calmness, her ability to meet my eyes without a shred of shame, made me want to scream. But I didn't. I wouldn't give her that power. I'm not here to beg you to stop, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm here to ask one question. Did you ever love him? Or did you just enjoy taking what wasn't yours? She tilted her head slightly, still looking at me. I think you know that answer better than I do. I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, she added, Isabella, I didn't break your marriage. I just walked into a place that already had cracks. The door closed behind me. Her words echoed in my mind the rest of the day. Had I let the love between us grow cold for too long? Had I played a part in pushing Thomas away? But even if a marriage has cracks, betrayal is never the answer. And from that day forward, I decided I would not be the victim. I began preparing for a confrontation, not with her, with the man who once vowed never to hurt me. I watched him unlock the door and step into the dark room where truth was already waiting. He didn't know. Everything had been recorded before he even got the chance to lie. I thought it through carefully. Confronting Thomas directly would lead nowhere. He'd deny everything. Call me paranoid, emotional, or say I was imagining things. I needed undeniable proof. And I needed him to face it in the one place he couldn't run our home. I invited Thomas to dinner that Friday, like an old date night, something we hadn't done in years. I picked our usual spot, the restaurant where we celebrated our first post-wedding anniversary. He looked surprised, maybe even moved. You look beautiful tonight, he said, his eyes searching mine like he was trying to remember something long gone. I smiled. We need to refresh things a little, don't you think? After dinner, I pretended to be tired. I told him to go home first. I'll swing by the store and grab a few things, I said. He kissed my forehead and left. But I didn't go to the store. I drove home, parked on the next street, and entered through the back door using my spare key. The house was dark, just as I expected. I placed a tiny camera in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one upstairs in our bedroom, all connected to Wi-Fi and recording live. I waited in my car, heart pounding so loud I thought it would burst. At exactly 8:47 p.m., Thomas's car pulled into the driveway. He stepped out. Then she stepped out from the back seat. Samantha. They entered the house. Lights turned on. They laughed. He poured wine. She curled up on the sofa like she'd done it 100 times. His hand rested on her thigh, and that's when I walked in. Comfortable, aren't you? I said, my voice cutting through the room. Thomas spun around, face pale. Samantha jumped up like she'd been electrocuted. I walked straight to the counter, picked up my iPad, and played the live feed from the cameras. Every single step, captured. Thomas stammered. Isabella, I can explain. No need, I said, holding up the screen. The truth is here. All you need to do is watch and stay silent. I turned to Samantha. I think you should leave. Now. She didn't argue. She left without looking back. And Thomas, he stood frozen, like a child caught stealing, unsure of which lie might salvage his last shred of dignity. That night, I didn't cry. I opened a bottle of wine, sat alone in the dim-lit living room, with the scent of lavender still clinging to the sofa. And I knew the next chapter of my life wouldn't have room for blind forgiveness. I placed the divorce papers on the table. But instead of anger or begging, he just sat silently, then said something that nearly broke me all over again. 2 days had passed since that night. Thomas hadn't left the house yet. He moved through our home like a ghost. No more excuses, no more hollow apologies. Maybe he knew words no longer held meaning. I spent those 2 days talking to lawyers, reviewing shared assets, making financial arrangements, and most importantly, preparing for a life no longer labeled Thomas Wright's wife. Was it easy? No. But it hurt more to keep pretending that betrayal could still be called marriage. Sunday morning, while Thomas made coffee in the kitchen, I approached and placed the divorce papers on the wooden table, the same one where we used to share dinners, laughter, and talks about having children. My voice was steady, but my hands trembled. All you have to do is sign. He looked down at the paper, then up at me. Long enough for me to look away. Then, to my surprise, he nodded. I understand. Just 2 words. No begging. No explanations. Just, I understand. I felt a lump in my throat. I had prepared for anything, for him to cry, to plead, even to fall to his knees like in some dramatic movie. But I hadn't prepared for acceptance. I sat down, facing him. Did you ever love her? I asked, not to salvage anything, but to close the door completely. Thomas was quiet for a long time. Then he said, no. But I saw in her what I once saw in you. What you stopped showing me. I closed my eyes. That wasn't a knife. It was a slow, bleeding cut. I couldn't deny that for the past 2 years, I had been distant. Work had consumed me. Failed pregnancy attempts had exhausted me. Loneliness within my own marriage had hardened me. But did that justify betrayal? No. Never. We both failed, I said. But cheating was your choice alone. He nodded. And, for the first time, I saw tears in Thomas's eyes. I stood up and began to walk away. But as my hand touched the door handle, he called out, Isabella. I turned. If I could go back to the moment I started drifting away. I wish you had pulled me back with a hug. I smiled. Sadly. I wish, too, that you'd said that before I had to walk away. And I left not as a woman broken, but as a woman who let go without falling apart. 6 months after the divorce, I received a letter from a law firm and a message that made me cry, not from pain, but because I knew, in the end, I had won. Life after divorce wasn't easy, but strangely, it felt freeing. I moved into a small apartment near Lake Washington. Mornings were for runs, evenings for books. I learned to cook, to dance, and for the first time in 7 years, I was living for myself. Thomas signed the papers and moved out within 3 days. I heard nothing from him until one crisp autumn afternoon. I received a letter from his attorney's office. The envelope read clearly, Thomas Wright, last will and personal statement. I froze. Inside was a short, handwritten letter. The first line read, If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to say I'm sorry the way I should have. My hands trembled. The letter wasn't long, but each word hit deep. Thomas had been diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer just a month after we divorced. He had kept it a secret from everyone, even from Samantha. She left him the moment she learned of his illness. No goodbye. No sympathy. He wrote, I betrayed you, not because I didn't love you anymore, but because I was afraid you had stopped loving me. I sought validation elsewhere, but in the end, no one ever looked at me the way you did. I was wrong. And I lost you forever. He had left his entire private estate to me with a note. You always deserved everything, even when I didn't deserve you. I broke down crying. Not because I still loved him, but because recognition finally came, too late to save anything. That night, I pulled out my old phone, the one I had used throughout our marriage. There was a message from Thomas, dated 3 weeks before I discovered the affair. It had sat unread the entire time. I want to try again, Bella. Today, I saw you smile, and I realized I still want to come home, where you are. I just don't know if you still want me there. I put the phone down, stepped onto the balcony. The autumn wind brushed through my hair. I whispered, if you had said that back then, maybe everything would have been different. And then I smiled, peacefully, because I knew, sometimes, the ending is just a beginning in disguise. I am no longer someone's wife. I am Isabella, the woman who walked through betrayal, loss, forgiveness, and stood tall.